The Doctor in the TARDIS. Next stop, everywhere.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. In honor of today's episode, I'm one of your co-hosts, Charles Skaggs, back in the basement of solitude, still hiding out from the coronavirus because shakes fist coronavirus. And here, episode 183, I'm joined once again by my wonderful partner in time and a special guest companion, whom we'll introduce here shortly. But first, let's talk to the main man himself, my partner in time, Jesse Jackson. How you doing, Jesse?
I am good, Charles. Excited to be talking about a classic Who episode. That's always a mixed bag at times, but it's always fun talking the Doctor with you, or as we should say, Doctor Who this time.
Yes.
Which I have a question about that. But I hope you're doing well in Ohio. You and the lovely Mrs. Lori.
Yes, we are doing all right. We're doing all right.
Good.
We actually took part in a certain Doctor Who watch-along this afternoon as we joined Stephen Moffat and Sophia Miles during the Doctor Who rewatch of The Girl in the Fireplace. My wife Lori's favorite Doctor Who episode ever. And so she wanted to be a part of that once I told her it was an option. And so that was good. But
have we talked about that episode?
We have not. And
okay,
for the specific reason that we were holding it off to see if we could get my wife, Lori,
that would be lovely,
to join us, because she always said, well, hey, if I ever do go on your podcast, that would be the story that I would want to talk about. Okay. So everybody needs to kind of encourage my wife to do that so we can finally talk about this episode. So if you're wondering why we haven't talked about it, that's why.
I'm not saying that emails should be sent to where we can send us feedback with the subject line, please join us, Lori. But I'm just saying, if that miraculously happened, would be kind of cool.
It would be. All right. But we're not going to talk about the Girl in the Fireplace today.
No.
Because, like I said, we're here at episode 183. We're joined by a very special guest companion who's been on the show before, once or twice, and has enthralled us every single time. So welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, everyone. DJ Nik from the Whiskey and Cigarettes show and the Happiness and Darkness superhero movie podcast. How you doing, Nick?
Hey guys, well, as always, I'm so honored and happy to be talking to two of my favorite Whovians, friends and brothers in podcasting arms, I should say. And also, it's incredibly serendipitous that we're reviewing this particular series of Doctor Who, as on the heels of our review of Superman 3 on Happiness and Darkness, as it's really weird there's that loose and curious type of supercomputers between the two. So I thought it was almost, that's why I say it's incredibly serendipitous, and I love how these things work out in different universes. So super happy to be here with you today.
Well, you're very welcome, Nick. We always love having you on here. Although I'm going to say that I like the War Machines a lot better than I liked Superman 3. I'm on the record for that. So
yeah,
one of my least favorite comic book movies ever.
Yeah. So Nick, the last time you joined us, you were giving us an update on how things were there in your homeland, Italy. So how are things going, and how are you doing?
Well, you know what? I am very lucky the fact that I have my own studio and I work from home, obviously being a radio DJ by profession. So it didn't really affect me as much work-wise, as I know, unfortunately, it affected so many people out there. Of course, I wasn't able to see my friends. I was able to see, my brother and my sister and stuff. But the thing is, we recently entered phase 2 and things seem to be going well. Like I'd mentioned, when we talked about it on our review of the latest season of Doctor Who, it's all about common sense. And sometimes I worry about the common sense that people around the world possess. I mean, I see it in Italy, and I just hope, and so far people have been very well behaved, and I just hope it will continue so that we can slowly but surely go back to our regular lives. And personally, I cannot complain. Family members are doing well, friends are doing well. So as long as, those I care and love about are doing okay, I'm fine with that. That's all that matters to me.
That's good. So your family's doing good? Your sister, your brother, your mom?
Yeah, everybody's doing great. As I said, the only sad thing is I got to see my sister today. I won't be able to see my brother for some time because he lives in Latvia. Okay. And so, of course, travel is not an option at this point, but he seems to be doing well in Latvia. And also, I have to definitely hand it to the Latvian government because they're definitely handling it very, very well.
Well, that's good. So you're able to, at least thanks to things like Skype, you're able to stay in touch somewhat.
Oh, yes, definitely. In fact, I'm so glad we live in an era where we can communicate with folks long distance like this.
Right. Can you imagine if we had the coronavirus and we didn't have, the ability to work from home and teleconferencing and all that? Yikes.
It would be terrible.
Yikes.
It really would. And I think the last time, one of the things you had talked about, you'd shared about missing your parents and being worried about them, and they are all doing well?
Oh, yes. I mean, they've also kind of gotten in touch with new technology, as it were, for them, because my dad is a university professor and now he has to do his lectures online. It's still a little bit challenging for him because he's used to obviously being in the lecture hall and doing his lecture in front of people he can actually see. So he tells me, I feel like I'm talking to myself. And I say to him, welcome to my world. That's what a DJ does. You yourself day in and day out. So at least you're getting the DJ experience. But other than that, no, they're both doing well. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's great. That's great to hear because obviously, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have been concerned about you, knowing, what we hear, get the occasional news report about what's going on in Italy. And especially, the past couple of months have been pretty rough, obviously. So, so I'm sure a lot of our listeners are relieved to know that you're doing well.
That's very sweet to them, and I'm just relieved that my two favorite podcasters are doing well. I'm glad that you two are keeping well and are hanging in there and stuff. And I'm really glad that you guys and your respective families are doing well too. So, like I said, that's what's important to me.
Are they bigger than us? Your two favorite podcasters, are they?
Well,
who are they? Do you want to give their names? No.
I think you guys know them very well.
All right. Well, I'm sure they're wonderful people. All right.
Oh.
All right. So without any further ado, let's get into our main discussion, or at least our topic that we want to talk about. Because, hey, we're talking here at episode 183. We finished up Torchwood month. Jesse definitely had plenty of chances to get his Torchwood fix. Can't say that I shortchanged you. I gave you four entire episodes, 5 if you count Tooth and Claw.
Which I do.
Yeah,
I think absolutely.
So now we're going back, way back, way back, as the 11th Doctor would say, all the way back to 1966, as we're going to talk The War Machines. And this is obviously from the William Hartnell era, written by Ian Stewart Black, who wrote a couple of other stories for Doctor Who back in the day. He wrote The Savages, which is a William Hartnell story, and he also wrote The Macra Terror, which John Takis and I talked about here on Next Stop Everywhere not too long ago. And this was directed by Michael Ferguson, and it was the 10th serial of Season 3 from 1966. So, yeah, back then you could get like 10 stories in a season. That wasn't just like 45 minutes long or an hour. So those are the days, right? And, of course, starring William Hartnell as the first Doctor, Jackie Lane in her last episode as companion Dodo Chaplet, and the introduction of Anneke Wills as Polly Wright and Michael Craze as Ben Jackson, the first Doctor's last companions prior to his regeneration into Patrick Troughton's second Doctor. And definitely we're going to talk about them. And before we get started, though, before we get into our guest cast and some trivia, I want to get everybody's general thoughts on this story, their reactions, especially if you've like, probably, I'm guessing in Jesse's case, you've never seen the story, and in Nick's case, probably, you've watched it before, but you're rewatching it again, because I know you did that. You've actually marathoned the entire Doctor Who series, so points to you, sir. And I want to get everybody's thoughts. So, Nick, let's start with you, since you're our special guest. What are your thoughts on general thoughts on this story before we get into our little more of a deeper dive?
Well, as both of you, I think, have come to know, I'm rather colorblind when it comes to Doctor Who, as I love all the regenerations passionately and dearly for different reasons.
Good for you.
To me, it's just one long story of the same character, which began almost 57 years ago, but is just different in appearance and having undergone that famous marathon that you touched up on, it really allowed me to see it that way and get attached to all the versions of our favorite Time Lord. And having been the first, I have to say I have a particular soft spot for William Hartnell, as I believe he truly shows off why he's so well loved by so many in what could have very much been a rather underwhelming episode plot-wise, I think. Right. Not to mention, this episode was the reason we got Kid Peddler, who went on to give us one of the most memorable and enduring Who villains, i.e. the Cybermen.
Yeah, co-creator of the Cybermen with Jerry Davis, yes.
Yeah. Also, I think, what I love about it is it's the only serial in which we get to enjoy the two splendid companions, Anneke Wills and Michael Craze, in the flesh, as all the other serials featuring them are either lost completely, are animated, or are stills. So it's a great opportunity for that. And I also have to say, from off the bat, I have a very big place in my heart for Polly. She may actually be my favorite classic Who female companion, but
nice.
And that's and that's why I was so happy to watch this. And the one thing that I thought was a little on the nose was the fact of the reference to the Doctor being referred to as Doctor Who in this serial, which did take me out of it sometimes, but it wasn't overly terrible. And also what I did like was I think that Wotan could have been a prototype for the Great Intelligence, which we would get later down the line with Troughton. So absolutely love this serial.
Funny you should mention that.
When I was talking about when I was doing research to do the polarity, I had a couple of suggestions in my mind that Charles might pick. So great minds thinking alike.
We shall see.
Yes.
I'm just gonna leave it there for now. I'm not gonna.
Yes.
I'm just gonna tease that a little bit.
Okay.
All right. But Jesse, how about you? What are your thoughts on this one?
So, as I said, I think sometimes classic Who can be a mixed bag, and that is because our viewing expectations and our viewing muscles are set a certain way, and like you mentioned, that you might get 10 or 12 stories that were longer than 45 minutes.
Right.
My counter argument is some of them shouldn't have been that long, right? Like some of them really should have been 3 episodes and they stretched them to 6. But in this case,
or 12 in the case of the Daleks Master Plan.
Yeah.
Which
but
I'd
in
love
this
to
case,
cover someday.
I think it was. I thought the story was pretty good. Mm-hmm. I thought the pacing was really good. I've got a few things that I want to wait and bring up when we're discussing the specific topics. But I was really happy with this one. And we have not, you and I, Charles, talked a lot of First Doctors.
No, we haven't.
And that's not it. We just usually, when we're doing classics, we we tend to go through, we do one, and we're doing like we are this time. We're going to do two, then three, then four, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And I like that format. I like
give
going through
give
that.
everybody their chance. Yes.
Yeah, but I was really, part of the joy, and Nick, I know you will agree with this. There are a couple things you need to do to be successful in podcasting. One is have a partner you enjoy talking to, and two, have a partner. No, and have a partner that's really good at picking the episodes you discuss, because that is, I think, and then we'll move off giving Charles compliments, but that is the unseen part of doing this podcast, because it's very easy to do a random, let's spin a wheel, and then we're going to talk about an episode that has nothing to talk about. So you take the time we always have something to discuss, either negative or positive. In this case, I think it was a really positive. How about you, Charles? Is this one you were very familiar with, or any thought on why you picked this one for us to discuss?
Well, I'm sure a lot of you out there that listen to this podcast, obviously sometimes we kind of wing things as far as, we try to talk off the cuff. We don't try to, I don't try to adhere to a specific script, because I like to keep things loose and fluid. So, but believe it or not, behind the scenes, yes, I actually do put a little bit of thought into our schedule. And that's why I always try to run things past Jesse. I want to make sure, he's obviously, because, hey, he's my partner in time, right? So I want to make sure that he's okay with everything. But generally, I do try to think about it. And I did, especially because I know that you're not as fond of the black and white era. Your William Hartnell and your Patrick Troughton eras. So I tried to get something that I thought you would like, that was a little, obviously a little faster paced, like you said, and I think this story fits the bill. It's kind of one of mine. It's one of my personal favorites from the Hartnell era, just because I like the characters in this one. It's toward the end of the First Doctor's era. We say goodbye to Dodo, whom we haven't really gotten to talk about here on the podcast, I believe, before. And then we get the introduction of Ben and Polly, who a lot of people only know from the modern era because they happen to have that nice little cameo in Peter Capaldi's final story, Twice Upon a Time, played by different actors, but the characters were there because of that big connection to the 10th planet. The last First Doctor story. So I thought this one was a good one to talk about. And like I said, it's very loose. It's kind of set, obviously it's 1966, but at the time it was contemporary. So essentially for the time period, you have a contemporary Doctor Who story. And I think, as opposed to like one of the purely historical stories that really dominated the Hartnell era, especially.
Well, I'll lead off, and then certainly Nick jump in. But as I was doing a little research, they talked about how rare this was to have a Doctor Who episode set in what you would call current times.
Yeah.
And that there were some new creative people behind. They wanted their own feeling. That's why they did Ben and Polly. It of course to us, it looks, very dated. You're right. The nightclub scenes and, the different things. But for then, I'm sure it's kind of the same. And now then, that's pretty normal,
right,
for episodes to happen in modern times, at current time. So I thought that was kind of a nice little bit of trivia. What else do you got for us, Charles?
Oh, and trivia? Well, trivia of what I mainly have is that, okay, so the idea for this story, the War Machines, I know that Nick mentioned Kit Pedler, a co-creator of the Cybermen. He was being interviewed for a position on the show as a scientific advisor, kind of like unit, with the Doctor. And the producers ended up asking everybody that was being interviewed what would happen if the recently built post office tower, which is featured very prominently in this story, somehow took over. And Pedler suggested that it would be caused by a rogue computer that communicated with the outside world using the telephone system. And the producers were like, brilliant! And they loved the suggestion. And not only did they offer Pedler the job, but then they turned the idea into the script for the War Machines. And so pretty cool, right? You get, you're basically brought in to apply for this, science, advisor to the show, and end up, being able, they take one of your ideas on to boot and turn it into a script, and then you end up writing for the show later and co-creating one of the most famous, iconic Doctor Who monsters, the Cybermen. So, Kit Pedler, that worked out pretty well for you, I would say, just a little bit. Nick, do you have anything else you want to add before we get into our main discussion?
Well, I mean, no, just to really sort of echo your thoughts I thought it was a nice little change of pace to have, something actually happen, should we say, in present times. It would have maybe been interesting. I also felt, but this is just a thought of mine, is if this came out in 1966,
right,
which was actually the same year that England won the World Cup in soccer. And I wonder when this was aired, whether that was still going on at the time or not. And, they maybe could have had some references there because of the fact of there being a lot of people and everything else for the World Cup at the time. So, because it was being hosted in the UK, and it was actually the year in which England so far has won their only World Cup to date. But, I just wanted to give that little bit of sports context more than anything.
So
is nice said.
Are you taking a little bit of a dig at England? A little bit?
Well,
they only won the World Cup back in 1966.
Yes, well, I mean, I suppose looking down, because Italy, we can claim to have 4 World Cups to our name, so it's like, just saying.
Okay, that's all right. That's fair. And as an American, I'm completely out of this conversation because we always are horrible. So, except for our women do rather well.
Yes,
they do.
Yes, they do.
So at least we have our women to fall back on. So I guess we can take some pride in that at least. All right. But I didn't know you followed the football, Nick. That's cool.
Oh, yes, when I'm not following hockey, I definitely
I knew you're fine. I knew you're a fan of the Montreal Canadiens, so I was a little surprised. So that's good. I'm learning a little bit about you today, Nick. That's good. All right. Guest cast. There's really not much to talk about here. But I just want to quickly mention that John Harvey, who played Professor Brett, and Sandra Bryant, who played Kitty, were both in the Macra Terror, written, like I said, mentioned earlier, by Ian Stewart Black. So I thought that was kind of interesting that all 3 of them are in this story as well. John Harvey played Aphicia in the Macra Terror, and Sandra Bryant played Chicky in that story. And then we also had William Mervyn as Sir Charles Summer, no relation, and Alan Curtis as Major Green, John Cater as Professor Melvin Crimpton, who meets a rather nasty end at the end of this story. But so that's pretty much the guest cast for this time. So, all right, 3 topics today, and topic number 1. No real theme here, but just some titles that I came up with. Topic number 1, Out of Order. And this I want to talk about the First Doctor and Dodo, because, hey, it's her last story. So I thought we should talk about her a little bit. And we might as well throw in, thanks to Nick's suggestion, let's talk about Sir Charles. Again, no relation, in this segment. That because, as Nick pointed out, that the Doctor and Sir Charles kind of have this sort of Third Doctor Brigadier thing going on. And it's almost like this story is almost like a prototype unit story from the Third Doctor era. At least that's the kind of vibe I get. Like it could have been like you could have taken substituted those two characters and replaced them with the Third Doctor and the Brigadier, and you could easily see this being a Third Doctor story. So Jesse, let's start with you. And got any thoughts about the First Doctor in this one, and your impressions of? I know she's only in the first half of the story because hey, she suddenly gets written out rather abruptly. Dodo.
The first thought was, at the initial, I thought the Doctor was a little too passive, and he wasn't actually being the quote unquote hero. But that changed as the series progressed.
Right.
And so I was
especially
glad
those
to see
last
that.
2 episodes. Yeah.
Yes. So I was very happy to see him. I do think it's there. All of us have vocal tics and quirks, and my dear, my boy,
right,
is pretty much the Doctor is doing that. I liked watching them, and I was watching this also with the eyes of knowing, after seeing, when we did the 50th anniversary, we saw that great telefilm that kind of gave the secret origins, the behind the scenes.
An Adventure in Space and Time, yeah.
Yeah, and we got a lot of knowledge of, as a casual fan of William Hartnell and how much he loved the role. And I watched him and seeing him play the Doctor and setting up a lot of things. In a lot of ways, it's a different character than what the show becomes, but there is a little bit of the Doctor's intelligence comes across, and he is often the smartest man in the room.
As you should be. Yep.
Yeah, I got a joke out of, and what's her name?
Dodo.
Dodo.
Yeah. Her real name is Dorothea.
Yeah.
But she's called by Dodo. So.
Yeah. He says she's his secretary, and there's kind of a little bit of the problem you have that it was written in the 60s, and that social context is still in there, and she doesn't do a lot except, get mind taken over and is a way to trap the Doctor.
Right.
So I don't have a lot to say about her one way or another.
Okay.
But what I did love, and I'm so glad Nick brought up the thought, is you get the feeling that the Doctor is friends with this guy.
Right.
Like, this isn't just someone he meets now. This is someone that when he is in London during this time period, he makes a point to go check on, to share tea, to visit, to you could almost see them, not that the Doctor drinks brandy and smokes cigars, but you could see them in.
Well, we know he drinks brandy because we saw that in Twice Upon a Time, remember?
Yeah, that's true. You could see them just having into the night, intellectual discussions about multiple topics.
Right.
They are friends. And so I really like that. I was surprised when and I don't know if you want to talk about it now, but when the machine asked for "I need Doctor Who," and he's called that a couple of times, led me down the rabbit hole that that's been an inconsistent, I guess, with the series. Like, it wasn't till Davison's where they started in the credits saying the Doctor.
Right. Well,
and
even he was the one who pointed that out. He's like, my character's name is the Doctor. It's not Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So.
And according to the article, even Eccleston's originally, they had him as Doctor Who, and it wasn't until they switched over they called it the Doctor.
Right.
And that I would have thought that by the second season they would have had him in the Doctor. I was surprised about that.
Well, especially in the UK, apparently the writers and and people writing articles about the show. it's kind of ingrained in their heads for some reason that to call the character Doctor Who, and even though the character's name is the Doctor,
Right.
so I'm sure they refer to him as Doctor, and because remember, you got to keep in mind this is 1966. The show was only in its third season, and you had a brand new writer in Ian Stewart Black, who so that's the kind of way I explain it. Nick, oh, go ahead. I was going to bring.
No, I was just going to bring up that similar to, it's Frankenstein's monster, not Frankenstein.
Yes.
Right. But that is what commonly, when you see the creature,
right,
and from the old Universal with the bolts and
people think his name is Frankenstein.
Frankenstein, which
so that's a great point.
So, Nick.
So Nick, what are your thoughts about this? And let's talk about Sir Charles too, since you were kind enough to bring it up.
Well, I mean, first off, to briefly address the Doctor Who reference,
yeah.
I mean, that was one of the things that kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit because of the points that you guys made, because it is the fact that the Who is simply because we don't know what the Doctor's name is.
Right.
And that's why it could have been, like you said, because of Ian Stewart Black being new to the show, as it were, maybe not have been given directions as in the guy's, his name is not Doctor Who. It's, he is the Doctor. But maybe it was just, like I said, a little sort of play on words and kind of just wanted to be a little bit on those, because I believe in other serials prior to this, there were moments where when the Doctor was, then somebody asked the Doctor and he said, "I'm the Doctor," and they would say, "Doctor Who," kind of thing. So maybe that's where it came from. So they just wanted to underline that even more a little bit. I don't know. Or it could have been a second storyline almost of, we will find out more later, and they just dropped it after a while. But it kind of bothered me a little bit. But, I suppose it's, it happens. So I will forgive Mr. Black for that. But,
you kind of have to hand wave that one. It's like, okay, they screwed up.
Exactly. I mean, we all make mistakes, so it's okay. But as I had mentioned before in this story, it does have a few plot holes here and there, and it might not be super solid, but I think one of its highlights and strong points is Hartnell's performance. As here you have him, he's pure and undiluted genius. He's very witty. He's a badass. And I feel the scene in which he stands in front of one of the war machines is what could almost be considered a superhero pose.
Yes.
It's worthy of any action hero out there. So it's kind of like, I really got that sort of, going back, that Superman vibe, kind of standing in front of the machine and staring it down with these steely eyes. It was just so iconic to me. And we get to see more of what is apparently a frail and grumpy old man. We get to see he's quick-witted. He has a high IQ. We had seen he's a decent fighter in the Romans because he was able to dispatch assassins without even lifting a finger. And, Charles, you and I talked about the Vikings in the Time Meddler, where he's hitting the Vikings over the head.
Yeah.
So we saw as a fighter. And also the banter is word perfect. Though in the first couple of episodes, like Jesse was saying, it seems like he's barely doing anything. I think it's the dialogue, which makes his presence very much felt. And definitely kudos to Ian Stewart Black in this case, because I think he wrote some great lines of banter, especially between the Doctor and Sir Charles. And also, who knew that the Doctor was an expert in the art of hypnosis and mesmerism?
Well, he was full of secrets back then. So it was everything they anytime we got to learn something new like that, it was a nice treat. Especially, if you hadn't seen any of these episodes before.
Yeah. And then, talking about also Charles Summers, briefly, William Mervyn, I think, also brings great charisma to what could have very much been a throwaway character. I got a very strong vibe, as we were mentioning, like you, Charles, that proto version of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. He and the Doctor have that chemistry and vibe going on. And you can tell, like Jesse was saying, there's that mutual respect and friendship. Though at the same time, they might get on each other's nerves. And I personally would have liked to have seen more of Sir Charles and the First Doctor down the line, as it was an incredibly entertaining back and forth to watch. And it was the reason why I so love this serial. And why I think it also does stand out because it sows the seeds for the kind of relationships that the Doctor will strike up with military leaders, i.e. units and MI6. So absolutely loved the relationship between Sir Charles and the Doctor. So brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I like Sir Charles as well, but the only time he really kind of got on my nerves was when Ben having just escaped from the war machines, and after breaking out and of that warehouse, and then rushing there and trying to warn everybody about the impending threat. Sir Charles is going, like, well, young man, you must be just making this up, and completely dismissing him because he's young. And I'm thinking, okay, this guy is in your military. He's a sailor for the British Navy, so you would think you would kind of give him a little bit more credibility, but maybe again it's because of the time period that I found him a little frustrating that he wasn't even willing to give Ben any benefit of the doubt here, especially when he looked so harried and wasn't joking in any manner whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think that is the time period, all right, that this young guy, I actually think there's a little bit of snobbiness of that being a scientist, being someone of upper class, possibly
Right.
gone to all the right schools, and here's this guy that's in the military. Like, there wasn't that respect of service, especially in the middle 60s, as there is now. So I think that was, once again, a sign of the time. But I think a really good point to bring up, Charles. I liked, as I said, I thought this was really nice, and to kind of show the Doctor and this, he has another life. It is a little weird to see the Doctor with a big old ring on,
Right.
When he's doing the hypnosis, and his mannerisms and everything it's a little off-putting, but it just makes him that much more of a character.
Well, Jesse, since you come from a new Who perspective, did it kind of weird you out a little seeing William Hartnell as the first Doctor after watching David Bradley in An Adventure in Space and Time and in Twice Upon a Time?
No, I think he did. I think because David Bradley did a great job of capturing that feeling, it made me, oh yeah, this is the Doctor. And I think the biggest part is the how, like right now, the Doctor and the companions, if you look at storytelling, they take a lion's share of the screen time, and that is not the case in Classic Who, at least not in this series.
Right.
So I think that's kind of interesting to see. No, I liked this Doctor, and I know we're going to move over to them, but
Right.
I really liked Ben and Polly. I thought they were. It's kind of a little disappointed now that that there isn't that many of theirs to see because of the loss of the episodes.
But thankfully, some of them are getting animated, so we're getting a few more here and there because of that. So, like we just got the Macro Terror not too long ago, and I know that the Faceless Ones is on the schedule, and that's their last one. So, so at least you'll get to
Good.
see eventually. Hopefully, get to see how they leave the show.
Good.
So, before we move on, I do need to move on, but I just definitely wanted to echo Nick's point about the first Doctor and his big superhero moment. That, as Nick put it, that at the end of episode 2, that great cliffhanger where, or maybe it's episode 3, I can't remember which one, that the military, the army, after sending in a squad to investigate what's going on in the warehouse, they get their butts kicked by the war machines somehow, and they're reeling. The war machine's coming out, and the first doctor comes in this great moment, like Nick said, stands right in the middle of the street as this thing's coming toward him, and he's looking with this big defiant look on his face, and it was such a great cliffhanger that like everybody else is kind of reeling for a bit, and here's the doctor just stepping right into the forefront, being the only thing between the war machines and everybody else, and so there was great symbolism there, and
There was.
and I love that moment. So I just want to echo Nick's statement on that. Great.
I agree.
Absolutely wonderful. All right, let's move on. Topic number 2, unless anybody has anything else they want to talk about. Topic number 2, swinging 60s, here I come, baby, yeah. So a little nod to Austin Powers because I couldn't resist. So here, yes, let's talk about Ben and Polly, as we who are very, at least especially Polly, very of the moment of the swinging 60s era, and we get their introduction as we go to the Club Inferno, and which is like this dance club, and Polly's there, and then she's got a friend who's like a bartender or waitress there, and then there's this sailor at the end of the bar who's being a little grumpy, not like Captain Grumpy, and he needs a little cheering up, and that's basically our introduction. After Polly, we'd seen her a little bit earlier as the kind of assistant to Professor Brett at the Wotan Center. So I want to get everybody's thoughts about Ben and Polly. So let's start with Nick this time. And Nick, you mentioned that Polly is one of your favorites from the classic era. So I'm sure you got 1 or 2 thoughts on this.
Oh yes, well, I like I mentioned, yes, I think this. First off, I think this was a very strong debut for these soon-to-be, newest companions. Like you said, Charles, I'd already gushed about Polly, and I think she's actually a step up from Dodo, as she's feisty yet good-hearted. And
right.
When we first meet her, we see that she is somewhat of a party girl, though she's not an airhead by any stretch of the imagination. She's very witty and fun, and there's instant chemistry between her and Ben the Mopey Sailor. Right. Even when she's a victim of Wotan's mind control. We see that she's trying to fight it. And rather than being completely overwhelmed, we see that she is companion material from the get-go, because just the fact that part of her is able to resist it. And it seems like the camera, also it has to be said, the camera really loves close-ups on her heavy eye-lined peepers, I must say. We get a lot of Polly's eyes in this serial, which is fine with me. And I love her energy. I love her outgoing nature. And she seems like a girl one could definitely enjoy hanging out with. So companion material for sure. And when it comes to Ben, the Mopey Sailor, as I said, I would almost consider him a proto-Jamie, as he's more rugged than Ian and possibly closer to Stephen in the way of male companions. But unlike Stephen, I think, who's more skeptical of the Doctor,
right,
Ben seems to be more one of those that will follow him less questioningly and has that sense of humor and snarkiness and sense of humor that reminded me of Jamie quite a bit, as, like his Scottish counterpart with Victoria Waterfield, which we see. Ben is very protective of Polly from the get-go. At the Inferno Bar, we see this, and we'll see also who'll be the Doctor as things progress. So I love Ben very much. I mean, he's your down-to-earth guy, and I suppose being a sailor, he probably hates being beached. So he's only too happy to be along for the ride. And I think he's definitely the kind of guy you could set your watch to, because you can see how loyal he is and how loyal he is both to his friends. And so, heck, who wouldn't want a friend like Ben?
Exactly. Good, great points. Jesse, how about you?
Yeah, I really liked both of them. You had shared when you had teased the episode that we got the addition of a new companions. So I think I would have figured it out anyway as they were telling the story, like we often do in modern. We're like, oh, it's almost like they're setting this character up to be a companion sometime. So I like them both. I'm so glad you made the Austin Powers joke, because I had not thought of that, but it's true. That is, it almost could be, if it was in color, a outtake from a scene from that movie that's, pushing the absurdness of the 60s. I just like everything about how they interacted. It's implied that there is some mutual affection between them, which, why wouldn't they be? The actress who played Polly is very beautiful.
Anneke Wills, yes, she is.
And so of course Ben, being a sailor, of course he's going to be attracted to her, right? She asked him to lunch, and we get this thing. But I like their interactions a lot. Yeah, but I think in that way that you do with someone you like, and they're a little bit of the opposites attract. I know during this era you're never going to have a romance on the TARDIS, though I guess we've had a married couple, but right? I just like them a lot. I thought I will probably watch some of the animated episodes a little bit more now that I've watched them in person, to kind of get a feel for their companionship and how they go later. But yeah, they were really nice companions and some good stuff.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think they were a solid introduction to these characters. They, like I mentioned, they tend to butt heads. Especially in these, their first few stories, because essentially Ben is this, the lower class, like you mentioned, Jesse, that he's in the military, but he's kind of lower class, and he views Polly as kind of a little bit snooty, a little bit of an elitist. He keeps calling her Duchess as a nickname to kind of ride her a little bit. But there is this there's this concern for her, and even they may banter back and forth. He still cares about her. I mean, he was very adamant about making sure that she was rescued from the warehouse, and makes this very impassioned plea to go to rescue her. So this someone who he's just met. So which kind of shows you what kind of a caring person Ben can be. Now, I think in comparison to Jamie, I think Jamie has the edge because he's a little bit more likable than Ben. Ben, in some occasions, he can be a little bit too abrasive, and I think that's the distinction, at least between those two, in my mind.
I would agree.
So is more softer-hearted, I think, than Ben. You do make a good point, Charles.
Yeah, but I can definitely see where you're coming from, Nick.
And I think Jamie's, I think in a lot of ways a prototype. Jamie, I have a lot of affection for because I love Outlander, which we've talked about multiple times. That this is a direct
Jamie McCrimmon fan fiction. Yes.
Yes, and. But every time you've picked a Second Doctor episode with Jamie, I just have loved their interaction. I've loved Jamie, and I won't ever see it, but I would love to see Jamie return, because we still have the actor. You could age him. And it just would be interesting to see the Doctor go back and visit that time. It's, I guess it's sad that, Dodo, we weren't that impressed with, and I don't know how good of a companion she was, but right away, Polly seems to outshine her. So you could see that.
Well, that may be because
setting up
Anneke
a
Wills
really interesting.
is better looking than Jackie Lane. Let's face it. So
I think more
She does have
charismatic
that
too.
Yeah.
going for her, yes.
Yeah, that charismatic. She is.
She has better screen presence. That's
she
for sure.
really. Yes, exactly right.
Just the camera loves Anneke Wills. So yeah, it's not hard to see, and it also helps that hey, Polly's a really good character when she's written properly. When a lot of times, there's been a lot of criticisms with the character in that, she kind of gets sidelined a little bit. Like there's a couple times in this story right off the bat where she's kind of left to like go get coffee, and like the scenes in the nightclub show that she can be a lot more than that. And she's spirited, she's full of life, up for an adventure, and then I think she was definitely a step up from a lot of the other previous female companions that we'd seen up to this point.
Yeah, very much so. But you know what, Charles, also talking about the fact of being sent to make coffee, unfortunately that will be a trait that will continue when we see also Victoria as well,
yes.
who maybe is a little bit more subservient than Polly. But
I'm looking
that
at you,
trait
the moon
of,
base.
should we say this? Exactly.
Yeah.
And we also got to see that in when we did the Time Meddler as well. We see that Vicky is a bit of more of a subservient character, and it was just the way, unfortunately, that women sometimes were written in TV shows and what have you.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
Just unfortunately, Polly was, I think, a victim of the time period, like you pointed out. Yeah. Anything else about Ben and Polly?
Nope.
All right. Let's move on. Topic number 3. Doctor Who is required. So let's talk about Wotan, our lovely little will operating thought analog. And let's talk about Professor Brett in Crimpton as well. And, of course, the War Machines. And dying to get everybody's thoughts about the War Machines, because I'm sure there's one or two that you'd like to share. So, Jesse, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on Wotan, the War Machines, and our two professors behind it all?
Our Dalek wannabes.
Yes,
the War Machine.
I think that's fair. I think that's perfectly fair.
I think, in fact, I kept, when they're having the scenes where they're kind of shooting from the up and they're showing the arm that's spraying the gas.
Yeah.
I kept going, are they going to show that these are Daleks? I kept waiting for this either to be a Cyberman or a Dalek reveal, because I had never seen it, and so I was
that makes sense.
Half expecting that.
You thought the title was kind of like a way to hide the villain.
Yes, and I say that with tongue in cheek, a Dalek wannabe. They were perfectly good villains, and if you're going to have a killer robot in Doctor Who, you're going to be measured against the Dalek. But I thought it was interesting. It is always, I think it's interesting, let me put it this way, that even back in the middle 60s, that people are thinking, well, what if AI becomes too smart, and they're not even calling it AI at that point?
Exactly.
But that's the premise, right?
And that's what this is.
What if they become smarter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is essentially an artificial intelligence story. Exactly.
And so I thought that was a good storyline. I thought it was very interesting and a nice twist. The scientists being taken over, and the whole idea that they know what's better. that the machine knows what's better for humanity than others. At first, it implies that the scientists don't think anything's wrong with that. So I thought it was a good premise. I thought, like I said, Wotan was a great villain. I did think it was going to be either a Dalek or the Cybermen were going to come out. And I won't say I was disappointed that didn't happen. I was more disappointed that I didn't guess correctly. But I thought it was a pretty decent villain. I don't know if it was good enough that I would repeat and want to see him again. This felt like a one and done.
Yeah.
But a pretty decent one.
Okay, that's fair. Nick, how about you? What are your thoughts on Wotan and the War Machines?
Well, you know what? First off, to briefly mention Professor Breton Crimpton, I think, to be honest, like to echo part of what Jesse was saying, it's hard, I think, to actually assess these characters as they spend most of the serial under the sway of Wotan's mind control. So they end up almost being mindless minions rather than actually having a distinctive personality. Though the brief moments we did get before they were taken over was interesting. Though I would have almost preferred them to be portrayed as fanatics of wanting to usher in this new order of totalitarian robots, almost an evil version of, say, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner when it came to creating Ultron. And I think it would have made for more of an interesting watch, and it could have pushed forward the concept of life becoming more mechanized. So I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity. But when it comes to Wotan, well, I have quite a few thoughts about this because I think there could be also, first off, a double origin to this particular villain. Because on one side, it could refer to the Wotan 1 and 2 that were actually German radio navigation projects, which were used during the Battle of the Beams in the Second World War, when the German bombers were bombarding the UK, and Wotan was actually instrumental in this, as it served as a radio navigation for bombers when it came to bombing the UK by night. So naturally, instantly evil to a British public. And of course, we have now the reference to the High Germanic version of Odin, who of course is the all-father of the Norse gods, because of the fact, of course, that Wotan, like Odin, has one eye, and I suppose, like his namesake, he commands this army from on high, as it were. I mean, I very much got a great, the great intelligence vibe from this villain, and that villain, bear in mind, was only a year away. We would get that in the Abominable Snowmen,
right?
And I think it was a missed opportunity. And what I thought was a missed opportunity was to not have a showdown of wits between Wotan and the Doctor, because of the fact that later on, having had the great intelligence, it would have been wonderful to have Wotan and the Doctor actually have a battle of wits rather than just, destroying Wotan. The War Machines, I can't say I was particularly fond of them, as I felt they were very B-movie sci-fi, which I suppose was part of their charm, but they were never really much of a threat, as you could pretty much get out of the way of the mallet. And I was trying to work out what they were... also, I was trying to figure out what were they spraying from that Dalek-style gun? As it seems to me they're trying to... I don't know whether it was like a fire hydrant or something.
It was. I think it was like it was like a gas that somehow paralyzed weaponry. Because you noticed after they sprayed the gas, the soldiers couldn't use their guns. They kept clicking them and they wouldn't fire. So somehow that gas paralyzed or mobilized mechanical rifles, and I would love to know how it did that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was just so weird. But Jesse makes a very good point, because I think they were trying to experiment with another villain which would fit the Dalek mode, seeing as, of course, they wanted to capitalize probably on the success the Daleks had, and bearing in mind, of course, the Cybermen were 2 serials away.
Right.
So your big villain at the point was the Daleks. In short, I think they were a little generic. Charming, but I felt a little bit generic. How about you, Charles?
Yeah, the War Machines in particular, because that slow-moving hammer doesn't seem like much of a threat. Even when it just kind of comes down and we get to see it smash a table in half or something. But yeah, that could easily get out of the way. It's kind of hard to see these things as a threat, especially when, hey, the military has these things called tanks. And, push comes to shove, you bring in a tank, and I'm pretty sure a tank versus the War Machine would be pretty much no contest, right? But the only thing that really the war machines have going for them is that gas, because hey, you can't obviously use your weapons, but I don't know why the military was even firing at the thing because, hey, it's made of metal. Your bullets are made of metal. Unless you have armor-piercing bullets, they're not going to be much good anyway. So the only thing that they should have been doing was throwing grenades down and trying to blow it up. So I don't know why they weren't trying that very often. I think we saw like maybe a couple of grenades, but that was about it. Wotan, though, this is, keep in mind, this is 1966, and we're getting, we're getting evil AI stories. Like Jesse pointed out, artificial intelligence the term hadn't even been coined yet. So this is essentially like a very early prototype artificial intelligence story. A year before Star Trek did that with Nomad in The Changeling, if you remember classic Star Trek, you remember that episode. So I kind of find it very interesting that Doctor Who was kind of breaking ground here a little bit with the notion, and because you watch this thing today and you're like, oh yeah, Wotan's got to be in like an artificial intelligence, right? And the professors, they go into this with noble intentions. They, like, hey, we're going to link it up with all the world's computer systems so that, hey, we can have everything under one roof and everything can talk to each other. But, it just so happens, well, hey, we must have kind of really screwed up some of the coding and it went evil on us. And oh no, hey, it took us over and turned us into its puppets. So ironic, right? But Wotan, obviously, being a 60s computer is something that could be easily defeated. And the Doctor ends up defeating it by just, hey, okay, I'm going to reprogram one of the war machines and have it smash Wotan. That's my big plan. And it worked. And everybody was freed. So, not the biggest, most clever use of the Doctor's brain power, but, you can't argue with the results, right?
It got the job done.
It got the job
Absolutely.
done. Exactly. So, other than that, anything else about the story that anybody wants to talk about?
No, not really.
Not really.
I did think, and there was one thing I brought up that I wanted to bring up that Holly does when we get to feedback.
Yeah.
The title cards were really a nice little twist, right? That
the kind of computer punch card style design.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that looked really cool.
Yeah.
Once again, felt dated.
Right.
But it's a dated episode, so it's not necessarily that it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, the producer at this time, Innes Lloyd, was he liked to experiment with the titles a little bit. It kind of carries over all the way through into the Troughton era, especially like in Troughton's second season, season 5, that you kind of had these where the titles were kind of incorporated and kind of fit the tone of the story a little bit, and so it was pretty. I kind of like this. I kind of like the idea that the titles. It showed a little bit more creativity, especially back in the black and white era. So that's always appreciated. The only other thing I wanted to bring up really quickly was we forgot. I wanted to bring this up when we were talking about Ben and Polly, where there was that scene, that really awkward scene, where in the club where the guy tries to accost Polly, the guy named Flash. And Ben kind of sticks up for her, he confronts the guy and punches the guy out because the guy takes a swing at him, and then he turns around and says to Polly, hey, maybe you shouldn't be encouraging him, and which is something I don't think would go over very well in 2020.
No, not at all. Folks
Got
would
it
be
off.
all over that. I mean, with social media and what have you. Oh man, that they'd have a field day with that one.
Now, to Polly's credit, though, they did give her, like, she's like, hey, wait a minute, she kind of protested, but then it was immediately dropped. So, I'm sure that probably probably helped fuel a little bit of the early friction between Ben and Polly until they kind of got to know each other a little better. So just kind of wanted to address that elephant in the room a little bit. All right. Anything else about this episode or this story?
I don't have anything.
No, me either.
All right. So favorite quotes. Nick, you sounded like you might have some favorite quotes, lines that you liked. So do you have any that you'd like to share?
Well, should we say that I don't actually have a favorite quotes, as it were, because if I were to actually quote the entire exchange between Sir Charles and the Doctor, I think we would be here all night. So
Okay.
That was absolutely my absolutely favorite scene, should we say, lines of dialogue. And I think it for anybody who's never watched classic Who, you want to see some great dialogue. You want to see the Doctor doing, a great scene when it comes to banter with a member of the military, or in this case, a noble or what have you. Definitely check this out because it is absolutely mind blowing. I absolutely love the banter between Sir Charles and the Doctor.
Excellent. All right. Jesse, how about you?
Yeah, I did not. I mean, as I was watching this, nothing stood out.
Okay.
Except the, and I tweeted this at the very end where, Ben says, hey, I've got to be on the base, right? I've got to report like in 5 minutes. And then they walk into the TARDIS.
Right.
And I'm like, famous last words. I'm curious if you found several, because I did not find a lot of clever dialogue. Good, solid storytelling, but not something that I would go, oh, I think this is worth repeating.
Yeah. I had to struggle a little bit, but I got a few that maybe I could share.
Good.
All right. So early on, after the Doctor and Dodo arrive in London, 1966, Dodo, the Doctor is a little skeptical at first about what's going on, and Dodo says, "Smells okay to me, good old London smoke." And the Doctor replies, "I can feel it's got something sort of powerful. Look at my skin. Look at that. I've got that prickling sensation again. The same, just as I had when I saw the Daleks. Those Daleks were near." And Dodo's like, who had never met the Daleks before, right? She goes, "Daleks, who are they?" And the Doctor replies, "Oh, yes, you didn't meet them, did you, child? No, and I pray that you never will." So I thought that was cute. I like that exchange a little bit.
Yes. I do think it's funny he calls her child, though.
Well, he does that to all of them.
I know. It's a little off-putting.
Yeah. Well, and also keep in mind that Dodo, she kind of sort of looked a little bit like his granddaughter, Susan. So maybe
she did.
So maybe that's kind of like he kind of sees her in that Susan way, because he kind of did that with Vicky too, as Nick knows.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yes.
After Susan's replacement, shall we say? I like the exchange in the club between Kitty and Polly when they're trying to figure out what to do about Ben. And Kitty says, "Well, see, he's no great advertisement for the most with-it place in town, is he? Couldn't you cheer him up a little?" And Polly goes, "All right, Kitty, leave it to us. Stand by, Dodo. This looks like a rescue mission. The Navy's in trouble." So I thought that was cute. And then Polly, the Doctor, and Ben, when Polly explains that Dodo's not coming back, she's going to be staying in the country for a while. She says, tells the Doctor says she's feeling much better and she'd like to stay here in London, and she sends you her love. And the Doctor's like, "Her love? Oh, there's gratitude for you. Take her all the way around the world through space and time, and then..." And Ben's like, "Come again, Doctor?" And the Doctor replies, "What? Nothing, my dear boy, nothing. And he kind of quickly brushes that aside. So I thought that was kind of very Hartnell-esque. I love Hartnell delivering his lines, even though he kind of flubs them here and there. I find that endlessly endearing, personally.
It is endearing, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why we love William Hartnell.
I think that's part of his charm, really. That stammering and the.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, he's kind of like the Yoda of his day. So, in my opinion, rating. So, everybody, let's start with you, Nick. What's your rating for this one?
I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10 bobbing mop tops. As
Nice.
Though the villains are not the best, it did leave me hoping that Wotan would return. Plus, we were introduced to 2 new classic Who companions, which I very much enjoyed both here and down the line. And just all in all, love the Doctor being such a badass. I mean, to me, this is the Doctor's badass episode.
Yeah, that was
the first Doctor's anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That cliffhanger. It stands right out, doesn't it? Jesse, how about you?
Yeah, it does.
Well, in the spirit of Christine, right, our grading scale.
Are you going on the Christine
I'm
scale?
going to give this. No. I'm going to give this kind of way our thought. I mean, I'm going to give this a solid 7.5. It's a 75%.
Yeah.
It's a solid C. And so I'm going to give it 7.5 TARDIS out of order signs.
Nice. I was going to choose that one, but I had a backup because I had a feeling one of you might have it. So
Okay, yes.
I'm a little more generous than both of you, a little bit, just a bit. I give this one 8 out of 10, and I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 slow-moving hammers that are easily dodged. But I just find the story charming. I love the fact that its importance to the Doctor Who canon. One companion exits, 2 companions enter, and it's the last complete story that we have of the William Hartnell era. Even though we did get the 10th Planet in a finished version using animation, but this is the last fully complete story that we have. So it's kind of an important one, I think, and it's pretty lively for the Hartnell era. So I kind of dig it a little bit. All right, we talked about it. We teased it a little bit earlier, but as we reverse the polarity, because we're not reversing the polarity, we're reversing it back. We're going to go ahead in time to 2013 with The Bells of St. John, the 6th episode of Series 7 in 2013, written by Stephen Moffat, a chap you may be a little bit familiar with. And in the story, it's an 11th Doctor story where he's retreated to a monastery in Cumbria in 1207 to contemplate the mystery of Clara Oswald, a woman he met twice previously but died both times. The Doctor answers the exterior phone in the TARDIS when it starts ringing. On the other end is, hey, it's Clara, whom the Doctor doesn't recognize at first. And Clara, having been given the TARDIS's number by, quote, a woman in the shop, unquote, whom we find out later is Missy, but we don't know that yet because Missy hasn't been introduced, and she believes she's on a computer helpline asking for help to connect to the internet because she sucks at computers, at least at this point. And when Clara repeats a phrase which previous versions of Clara have said, the Doctor realizes who she is and sets off to meet her. Arriving in present-day London, so essentially this is a contemporary London story like The War Machines, the Doctor finds Clara being uploaded via a mobile robotic server disguised as a young girl using Wi-Fi. The Doctor halts the upload and successfully reverses it, sending a message that Clara is under his protection. Outside, the uploaders cause an airplane to descend at the Doctor and Clara, who quickly board the TARDIS and land on the plane, which the Doctor saves from crashing, because it's the Doctor. And the Doctor and Clara travel to a cafe. Clara uses her new computer skills she picked up because she was uploaded, and they tracked the uploaders to their base inside the building known as the Shard, which I got to see while I was in London. Very cool building. The doctor encounters people inside the cafe under the control of a woman named Miss Kislet, who explains that living minds are being fed to her clients. Mysterious clients. Miss Kislet distracts the doctor long enough for a server disguised as the doctor to upload Clara completely. Angered, the doctor reprograms the doctor server and sets out to Miss Kislet's office inside the Shard. The doctor server demands she release all the minds that have been uploaded, but Miss Kislet refuses. The doctor then uses the server to upload Miss Kislet to the network, and now trapped in the network, Kislet orders her subordinates to release her. By doing this, everyone else, including Clara, is restored. The restored Miss Kislet contacts her client, revealed as the Great Intelligence, to report her failure. The Great Intelligence orders her to reset all the people working there, including herself, clearing their memories in the process. Meanwhile, the doctor takes Clara home and offers her a chance to travel with him, which she refuses. What? She then tells him to come back tomorrow because she may change her mind by then. The end. And so if you liked The War Machines, I recommend The Bells of St. John. Because, hey, the Great Intelligence, right? So for those of you here on our podcast who obviously guessed the Great Intelligence, well, points to both of you. Good job, guys.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Now,
Charles,
go ahead.
May I actually, if I may?
Yes.
I would also pair that with the Snowmen as well, it being another Great Intelligence episode, which, talking about Wotan and stuff, I would also add the Snowmen to that as well, which I think is another great 11th Doctor episode with the Great Intelligence being the main villain, as it were.
Well, I agree, but I'm going to save that one for now because I'm keeping that in mind for another story we're going to be talking about very, very soon. So I'm going to, but I take your point, sir, definitely. All right. Now, today, I don't know who was on the interwebs today, but, it's May 6th, 2020 as we're recording this. And I don't know if you happen to check out the global rewatch of The Girl in the Fireplace that we were talking about earlier. Because, hey, Stephen Moffat wrote a Pompadour sequel to The Girl in the Fireplace for the Lockdown rewatch. And, oh, hey, Sophia Myles reprises her role as Madame de Pompadour. So, either of you get a chance to see that today?
I have not seen it yet. It's saved. I saw a couple. I knew there'd been a lot of hype about this.
Yes.
So I was excited about it. I just haven't had a chance to watch it yet. So I'm sure it's brilliant. I say again and again. I keep saying this, Charles, that there is so much greatness that the Doctor Who community is doing. These creative minds that love the Doctor, former showrunners, have just embraced revisiting this episodes, giving us little treats. I just think this is amazing, and I'm looking forward to seeing this, this kind of continuation prequel.
Nick, did you happen to see it by any chance?
That, just like Jesse, it's also on my saved list, as it were, as today The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow took precedence in this case. But so I will definitely be watching that tomorrow. And to echo Jesse's thoughts, it's very true. It's amazing how ingenuity and stuff comes out even more so during such difficult times. And I think it's wonderful that seeing what everybody's going through worldwide, how they say necessity is the mother of invention, and I think that in this case it's very true, because it is very necessary for new things to be invented during this time, and I think this is a great example of that.
Yeah,
And Charles,
I'm sitting here wearing a Flash
I'm sorry,
T-shirt.
Charles.
Yeah, I'm sitting here
Yeah,
wearing a Flash T-shirt, and so I can't fault Nick for his
yeah,
decision in that
yeah.
regard. But
So I did want to go. Hang on, Charles. I'm sorry. And go ahead. You finish. I know you want to give don't spoil anything, but if you want to give a tease for it,
Yes.
please do. And then I have a slight gestatorial I want to get into about this.
Okay. All right. Well, first,
Just slight.
All right. Well, first, yeah. So I'm not gonna. So I won't spoil it for you guys. I will just say it's a 2.5 minute YouTube video, and I posted it on our Next Stop Everywhere Facebook page, so you can find it rather easily now. And I will say that you probably should watch it after you rewatch The Girl in the Fireplace, because if nothing else, you'll have a box of tissues handy after weeping a little bit after watching The Girl in the Fireplace. Just keep in mind that just keep that box a little close. That's all I'm saying. And I'm just going to leave it there.
I will do that.
How's
Okay,
that for a
good.
tease?
That is a great tease.
Yes.
I just want to, with our Emily Cook, the producer, she's a producer for BBC.
Running behind all these lockdown
is
rewatches.
Organized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and like so much in the world, when you try to do something good, there's someone who wants to poo-poo it.
Yes.
I will keep my language clean. And she's handled it with so much grace and so much joy. And Gaiman has supported her, Stephen Moffat, everything. And the latest was, well, why aren't you doing any Classic Who rewatches? And instead of responding with anger, she actually went out and found a couple of other groups that were doing Classic Who rewatches, and she retweeted them saying, well, if you want a Classic Who retweet, a rewatch, here are a couple you could do. So I think she is an example of someone that's trying to do to bring a little lightness and goodness in the world, which is the spirit of Doctor Who. And as she talked about it, every piece that they've done, as she said, zero budget. Content is produced in about a week with no money while working around the constraints of self-isolation. And it's just been a gift to the Doctor Who fandom. So back off, people. Be nice to her. Go ahead,
Well
Charles.
said, Jesse.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I would love to see a Classic Who rewatch, handled by Emily Cook, but I'm not going to bent out of shape over it, because hey, we should be appreciative for what we get, right? And I know
absolutely, that's it. Oh yeah, I know. Wouldn't you love to see Davison or Colin Baker or even Baker,
Sylvester
Tom Baker,
McCoy,
be involved in this? Yeah, McCoy. But let's be happy with what we got, right?
Right.
And to have Sophia Myles and Moffat and everyone get involved, it's just really cute, and it's such a joy.
Yeah. And apparently the next one's going to be on, I believe it's May 12th? No, May 10th. I'm sorry. And that's going to be
May 10th.
May 10th. And it's going to be the Zygon Invasion / the Zygon Inversion, which Jesse and I have talked here on Next Stop Everywhere, of course, and from the Peter Capaldi era. And that's going to be featuring the Ingrid Oliver, who played Osgood, and the writer Peter Harness, I believe.
Yes, that's what it looks like, and that's just awesome. I just think this has been so much fun.
Yeah, and that's a really good two-parter too.
Yeah.
So hopefully you get some more people.
It's really good.
I'd like to see Gemma Redgrave, who played Kate Stewart. I think that would be cool too.
Oh yeah, that would be really cool. I agree.
Be amazing.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
So we have some feedback this week. We have two actually. Yeah. So Jesse, do you want to read Holly's first, or should I?
I can read Holly's.
Okay, go for it.
From Holly Mack. Hi,
Yep.
Charles, Jesse, and Nick. That would be us.
Nick got a
It's
shout
been
out.
a while since.
Yay.
Exactly. It's been a while since I watched the story, and it still holds up. The title card that they used after the theme music was really cool and probably very cutting edge when it first aired. The Doctor and Dodo back in London, and the Doctor getting a sneaky suspicion about the tower that had just been built. We also get introduced to Ben and Polly. Have to say, when I first saw Ben, I wasn't too sure how well I would like him, with him being mopey at first, not being able to go with the rest of his crew and having to stay landside. I found it interesting and a little worrying that Wotan knew what the acronym TARDIS stood for. By the way, that was a really nice moment where I know, I'll ask him a question they won't know, and the machine did. That's my interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Not from Holly. Yeah. Wotan also referred to the Doctor as Doctor Who, which makes me wonder if this was just a slight continuity error or if they were really trying to come up with a last name for the Doctor at this point in time. We did talk about that, Holly. Hope you enjoyed that discussion. The meeting with the heads of government and wanting to connect all their technology and information to Wotan was interesting. And one of the members commenting if that was such a good idea. I'm with him on that. Skynet, anyone?
Right.
Very well said. Yes, Monarch was an interesting shadow villain. Makes you wonder who was really behind this in the first place. Seems like something the Master, or heck, even Davros, would cook up to give the Doctor a major headache. It was nice to see Polly being able to fight off some of the mind control that Wotan was implementing. The ending with Ben and Polly trying to return the TARDIS the TARDIS key that the Doctor had given Ben starts the two of them on their journey with him. I'll wrap it up here. Holly from Wisconsin.
Yay.
Thank you as always, Holly. It is always great to hear from you.
Yeah, obviously Holly was great during our discussion of Children of Earth, and so it's great, always great to have her chime in with an email here and there. So thank you, Holly, for doing that. And then next, of course, we have who's become somewhat of a regular emailer these days, David K. Proctor, writes in, still also talking about the War Machines. He goes, I kind of enjoy going back to before my old self was born and catching a classic William Hartnell episode. I know you can't really judge shows back then on what we know now. Sometimes one can't help it. Interesting. The Doctor is referred to Wotan and some humans as Doctor Who. Perhaps that was the original intent. Pacing is a little slow, as this is about 2 hours broken into 4 parts in a story that in modern days could be an hour easy. This was one of the earliest stories where the title referred to the entire story. Originally, each episode had a title. And then they ended up changing that about 2/3 of the way through Hartnell's era. Great way to change up companions. The TARDIS key changes properties throughout the series. Later, it takes more than the key. Takes on more than the key. That takes the Doctor, I think. But even later, it opens to a snap. I do find it odd that the two new companions think it's a small box, and instead of just opening the doors and looking in, they both fully enter and close the door. That would be atypical at best. Yep, that's a good point. It is an interesting.
That is, I thought the same thing.
Yeah. You could see Polly going in, and then she should have called back for Ben. Like, Ben, you got to come in and check this out. Yeah. Something to that effect, I think. It is an interesting variation on the Dalek story where humans, instead of Khaleds, design a machine that attempts taking over. Big sci-fi trope from then on. I cannot help but marvel that humans thought that computers could eventually take over the world, but still would rely on magnetic reel-to-reel tapes, right? They had them on Wotan and the War Machines. I know what I would aim for with just about any weapon, including a rock. Why would you not put this inside? I think this was Hartnell being very modern Doctor-like in that he was up front and directly leading and not just trying to survive and not interfere with the time stream. I give the story a 7 out of 10 wannabe Daleks. thank you, excuse me, David K. Proctor. So thanks, David, for writing in. Great thoughts. And once again, thanks to Holly for writing in. And hey,
Agreed. That was really good of you, David. Yeah. Yes, Charles?
those awkward moments where Jesse flips his audio back on. All right.
Yes.
So if you want to be like Holly and David, and please do, write to us. Next Stop Everywhere, smg@gmail.com. That's Next Stop Everywhere, SMG for Southgate Media Group at gmail.com. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter at Next Stop SMG on Twitter, or on Facebook, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Or you can reach out to us on Instagram at Next Stop Everywhere Podcasts. And Nick, since you were so kind enough to join us today, feel free to shamelessly plug as much as you want, sir, because you're all kinds of awesome, and we love having you here.
Well, I don't know about all kinds of awesome, but when it comes to me, as Charles mentioned at the top of this episode, I am the host of the Whiskey and Cigarettes Show, which is a country music radio show, which if you are a fan of country music, you can check out every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information about that, you can go to our website, which is whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. And if you are fans of superheroes, be it Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, or what have you, we do also do the Happiness and Darkness podcast. And if you want to come on and discuss a movie of your choice, you can send us an email at happinessanddarknesshow@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter under High Darkness Pod, and also on Instagram under Hin Darkness. So, of course, you want to discuss one of your favorite superhero movies, hit us up. We'll give you the list, and you're welcome to come on for sure.
And Nick's been kind enough to have both Jesse and myself on. Everybody, please check out his podcast. He does these wonderful movie discussions and puts up with our nonsense. And he's so wonderful at that. And I think everybody needs to send him some love. And I know I need to send him some the listing of what movie we're going to be talking next, because he sent me a list here a couple weeks back, and I didn't get back to him. But I have a movie in mind. So maybe we can talk about that off the air.
I am interested. Yeah, we need to get you and Jesse back on the podcast for sure, guys. Every time we get to, we have the pleasure of having you on Happiness and Darkness. It's always a joy. So definitely, it's about time you guys came back.
Yeah, and as for Jesse, where can they reach you on the interwebs?
Well, Charles, first off, they can always, if they want to hear more of this classic banter between you and I, we actually do a couple of podcasts together. If you are going through while you're being self-isolation and you're binging and you go, hey, what's this Watchmen show that everyone talked about? On the Fandom Zone podcast, Charles and I covered that. If you're doing DC Universe and you've done Doom Patrol or Titans, we talk about that on Titan Talk. So please check out those two podcasts for some TV discussions. That's always a lot of fun. My podcast I never remember to promote is the How Many podcast, where basically it's just 3 or 4 of my friends sitting around talking pop culture topics.
That's easy for you to say.
Exactly. The latest episode was we went through a list of 40 or 50 boxing movies and determined how many we would call good. So that's, I think, at least partially entertaining. I won't give it all the way entertaining, but it is at least fun. And then, of course, Set Listing Bruce, the Bruce Springsteen podcast that Nick has been a guest on, where I talk to Springsteen fans from around the world and fans of other types of musicians and music, and we share the power and the joy of rock and roll. Charles, where can they hear more from you?
Well, of course, you can hear from me at Charles Skaggs on the Twitter machine, where I do things like, hey, live tweet Doctor Who rewatches, or on Instagram at Charles Skaggs, or on Facebook, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio, and my blog, Geeky Things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Next Stop Everywhere. Your Doctor Who, your Torchwood, your Sarah Jane Adventures, all kinds of comic book sci-fi goodness. And news of my other podcasts that I do for Southgate Media, including the aforementioned Titan Talk, the Titans podcast, or the Fandom Zone podcast that, hey, I do with that Jesse guy, or Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast that I do with Zan Sprouse, whom you've heard here on Next Stop Everywhere, who's also all kinds of crazy awesome. And we have such a ball talking all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, and if you know Zan, a ton of pop culture references. So if you're into that kind of thing, we definitely appreciate all of you checking out our podcast. So thanks again to all of you that have, and please tell your friends about us if you like our work and feel like we're worth sharing, because we'd love for you to spread the word, especially about Next Stop Everywhere. And Jesse, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I hope everyone's enjoying these rewatches. We have a plan, and we think it's unlike Battlestar Galactica Cylons.
Just like the Cylons,
we have a real plan.
Yeah,
but we have a good one. So please check with us. But if you do have some suggestions that you want us to get to, we'd love to hear from it. Nick, I am so glad you spent time with us. I am so glad you were doing well. I need to figure out a way. We need to figure out some time for not only for me to join you and talk another comic book movie, but for you and I to figure out a music topic and have you on SLB. But for now, please be safe, my friend. And thank you for your friendship and your support. I know it means the world to me as well. I know Charles is about to say the exact same thing.
Yeah, you just made me completely redundant. Thank you. Because yeah, Nick, we really appreciate you. We love your friendship. You're so wonderful to us. You're such a big supporter of everything we do. So just want to take a moment to specifically thank you for that. We really appreciate it, and we love talking to you. And it's been a couple months since we've had the opportunity to do that, and I'm glad we got to do that here. And I hope you had a good time.
Oh, well, I always had a blast, and you know what? It was definitely worth the wait for sure. And I will also, add the fact that Charles and Jesse, folks, are national treasures. Seriously, when it comes to podcasting, you can't go wrong with these two brilliant guys. They put the passion in, they put the work in, they put the research in. So definitely check out everything they have going on, because they're just wonderful human beings and they are fans of this stuff. They know their stuff. So definitely check them out. And thanks again to both of you for having me back on. Look forward to next time. And, it's always a blast and a pleasure. It's one of the highlights of my week.
Well, thank you, sir. And we definitely need to make that sooner rather than later, as far as I'm concerned. All right.
Absolutely.
So next time on Next Stop Everywhere, as we close this out finally, episode 184, Jesse and I are going to talk The Web of Fear.
Ooh.
One of the classics from the Patrick Troughton era, and featuring a villain that was mentioned in this very episode. I'm not going to say which one. And we don't have a special guest companion. So it's been a while. Nobody volunteered to help discuss this story with us. So it's just going to be Jesse and I this time, as far as I know, unless somebody hurries up and lets us know that they want to join us.
And we would love to have someone else join us. But I got to tell you, Charles, sometimes it's nice to go back to the basics.
Yeah.
And just you and me, bottles of Pepsi and Diet Coke and talking Doctor Who. That's where it all started from.
Exactly. So we're going back to the basics. This one's a 6-episode one, so it runs about 2 hours, 15 minutes total. So essentially like, oh, hey, a movie. So it shouldn't be that tough. Hopefully not that much of a chore for Jesse to get through. But I really like this one. This is, featuring the return. Well, actually, no, I take that back. It's the debut, right, of a certain Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, if I'm not mistaken. Although he's he's a corporal at this stage, or excuse me, a captain at this stage, I believe. something like that, or whatever the rank lower is. He hasn't been promoted yet, so this is a pretty notable one, and I'm really looking forward to talking about that. This is one that I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and Nick, I hope you tune in. And
I love this. This is one of my favorite Troughton cereals, so I definitely will be checking this one out for sure.
All right, so everybody be like Nick and come on back next time. Episode 184, The Web of Fear. It's going to be great. And Jesse and me, the partners in time, the original partners in time, talking this one. And we'll see you next time right here on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.